Welcome to Part C of the Lyceum Project 2026 on Entangled Intelligence. My name is Eva Steiner-Karatairi, and I am Head of Communications at the National Center for Scientific Research, Demokritos. It is my honor to be your host this evening as we explore the theme of artificial intelligence. On behalf of the Lyceum Project's 2026 organizers, I would like to thank our co-organizers, the Special Secretariat of Foresight, Presidency of the Government, Hellenic Republic, the Center for Hellenic Studies in Greece, Harvard University, the Athens Conservatoire, and the IEEE Standards Association. The event has been under the auspices of the Ministry of Digital Governance and Artificial Intelligence, the Region of Attica, the National Commission for Bioethics and Technoethics, and in synergy with the National Museum of Natural History, Goulandris. We would also like to thank our founding academic partner, the Institute of Ethics in AI, University of Oxford, as well as all our academic partners, the Athens Columbia Global Center, the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, and the National Kapodistrian University of Athens Applied Philosophy Research Lab, University of Patras and School of Humanities and Social Sciences of the University of Patras, the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, L'École Normale Supérieure, the Inclusive AI Lab, and we would also like to thank our supporters, the Global Canopy, the Hellenic Artificial Intelligence Society, the British Council, and the Byzantine and Christian Museum. We would also like to thank our sponsors, Google, Microsoft, Cosmotet Telecom, Endeavor, Ubitech, Public Power Corporation SA, as well as our official airline partner, Aegean. Finally, we thank our sponsors, our media sponsors, ERT, Καθημερινή, and Orthos Logos. Thank you all. Please join me now in welcoming Professor Edward Harcourt, Director of the Institute for Ethics in AI at the University of Oxford. Edward, I now hand over to you.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. Let me echo the sentiments that have been expressed deservedly often already today, which is to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers for putting together such a fascinating and wide-ranging occasion. Now, I've been asked to bridge the ancestral and the artificial, so because we're meeting so close to the site of the Lyceum, I'd better begin with a connection between AI and Aristotle. An influential book from more than 10 years back, Superintelligence, imagined a doomsday scenario in which AI stops at nothing to manufacture paperclips and thereby destroys humanity. Whether or not that scenario could come about, destroying humanity to make more paperclips is not the act of a superintelligent agent, but the act of a super stupid one. This can be seen thanks to Aristotle's distinction between intelligence and mere cleverness. The latter is about matching means to ends, and certainly the so-called superintelligent AI was good at that. But though technically gifted, such an AI would have all the real intelligence of the recovering alcoholic who jailbreaks the rehab center to buy yet another bottle of whiskey, which is to say, none at all. That's because it lacks judgment, phronesis, the ability to discern what's worthwhile for the sake of what. Real intelligence requires that. When we're told about how AGI might exceed human intelligence, we should bear that distinction in mind. But my main theme takes off from elsewhere in Aristotle's Ethics. Aristotle talks a lot about the virtuous person, as if there was a unique motivational profile that deserves that label. Perhaps one reason why he spoke in the singular was that the field of application of his ethics was already narrowed down so dramatically by assumptions that he does not make explicit. He was, after all, thinking only of young, upper-class Athenian men. If we broaden the focus to the whole of humanity, as we need to do nowadays, can we be confident that there is just one thing called the virtuous person? Do we even want there to be? Whatever Aristotle said, in my view, a healthy society needs lots of different sorts of people. We need promise-keeping and truth-telling, but we also need compassion and generosity. And given human imperfection, we may need different people to embody each of these pairs of virtues. There is a moral division of labor. But a successful society needs more than just moral variety. We need some risk-takers and some cautious people, some creative people and some repetitive drones who are good at acting on instructions, some cheerful, outgoing people and some brooding, inward-looking people, some morally compliant people, and some who are prepared to break moral rules for fun, for love, out of curiosity. If we didn't, things would be very boring. We would not have creativity and innovation, though we also need order and due process to contain the ferment of creativity and make sure it doesn't all go horribly wrong. The structures that stimulate this kind of human diversity, whether it be schools and universities, or different family cultures, or different faith traditions, or looser habits of thought like the English Diskussionskultur, that's what the Germans call it. We don't have a word for it, but they call it that because they want to make fun of us about it. Roughly, the tendency to shape any conversation on the model of a debate in the House of Commons are examples of what I mean by soft infrastructures. Another crucial soft infrastructure is that set of institutions and habits which contain this diversity, which don't regulate it so much that it dies off, but regulate it enough that people don't come to blows. Democracy is one example, free media is another. What's more, though some soft infrastructures can be created from scratch by a piece of legislation, others have been with us for a long time, and the more informal they are, the harder it is to say how long. To that longevity, they owe their authority, the authority of custom. In fact, even the effects of one-off legislative acts depend on custom for their acceptance. So wherever there are soft infrastructures, we have the presence of custom, that is, of the ancestral. But what has all this to do with AI ethics? My answer is a lot. For many people, AI ethics is basically about training models to think ethically. I disagree. One reason for that is that before we can start training models to think ethically, we have to decide, as ethical benchmarking researchers often put it, what the correct ethical theory is, utilitarian, Kantian, or what? Some philosophers, including me, think that the very idea of an ethical theory is a mistake. We call ourselves anti-theorists, a rather niche counterculture within the contemporary philosophical scene. But even if it isn't, it means that by the time benchmarking begins, a great many of the most interesting ethical cards have already been dealt. That's one reason to think there's more to AI ethics than the training of models. Here's another. pretty obvious one once you think about it. AI ethics surely includes teaching human beings to think ethically about AI. That's to say, improving human understanding, another critically important piece of soft infrastructure. Not all human beings, perhaps, but certainly those human beings in charge of AI deployment, namely the chief executives, the chief technology officers, and others, whose job it is to decide whether to deploy AI, where, and if so, which versions of AI it should be. The AI future is ultimately not just about what's technically possible, but a matter of human decision. If the consumer is to have the power to drive technological innovation, as they should have, these decisions cannot take place in a vacuum of information and understanding. Part of filling that vacuum has to do with ethical education on the costs and benefits of adopting this or that version of AI. There are more possible AI futures than the tech giants would like us to imagine. Here are a couple more examples of how the AI ethics agenda is broader than training models to think ethically. One is so-called distributed AI. This technical innovation mitigates the risk of the overconcentration of data ownership in few hands, a very important feature in a free society. It too has nothing to do with training models, but it's an innovation inspired by an ideal of the proper distribution of power, an ethical ideal. Yet another example is what's sometimes called Socratic AI, a name I hope you enjoy despite the fact that we're in the Lyceum rather than in Plato's Academy, as developed in, among other places, the human-centered AI lab at Oxford's Institute for Ethics in AI. Typically, if you ask an LLM a question, it will just tell you its answer. No need for you to think for yourself. That's why LLMs create the risk of cognitive atrophy. If we're so ready to let AI answer our questions for us, we will gradually lose the ability to answer them for ourselves. And that is why humans in the loop is such an inadequate response to the problem of what responsible AI looks like. For if the human has internalized the idea that AI has all the answers, then although the human retains the bare power to say yes or no to a recommendation on the use of an AI-powered weapon or on whether to grant a prisoner parole, the human has lost their power of practical judgment, the power to think through why that decision is the right one and to defend it against alternatives. Socratic AI, by contrast, makes us think harder, not less hard. Like a good tutor, it's designed to question us, not to do our thinking for us. To the extent that it's ethically important that humans continue to hone their powers of practical judgment by exercising them, and of course it's vitally important, or we'll be back to the paperclip scenario, Socratic AI has a huge ethical significance. But once again, like distributed AI, it is an aspect of AI ethics that has nothing to do with training models to think ethically. Its ethical significance lies rather in the way it configures the relationship between humans and their AI companions. In both cases, the ethical burden is borne not by the content of some ethical code that a model's trained on, but by features of the AI ecosystem as a whole. In one case, that was the hard infrastructures of distributed AI. In the case of Socratic AI, the infrastructures are both hard and soft. Socratic AI belongs on the hard side because it's a design feature of the AI itself. But Socratic AI cannot configure the relationship between AI and humans all on its own. Part of the value of that relationship will be owed to Socratic AI itself and its distinctive affordances. But humans can only make good use of those affordances if they have powers of practical judgment to preserve and the readiness to exercise them. Where exactly the honing of these powers belongs is hard to pin down. It's once again in soft infrastructures which, on the one hand, encourage reliance on epistemic authorities. We don't want to be reinventing the wheel, so that's another aspect of ancestral intelligence. And on the other hand, questioning them when it's proper to do so. These habits of thought are nurtured in so many ways, from access to plural sources of knowledge, to encouragement to speak one's mind, which in turn can come from all over the place: school, home, work, the culture at large. The fact that these infrastructures are hard to identify and often grow from the bottom up is also something that makes them fragile. There's a symbiotic and potentially constructive relationship between AI affordances and human soft infrastructures. We need to get much better at identifying and naming these latter so we can take care not to damage them. Still, if AI is to bed down well in human society, it's a matter not just of how the AI is designed, but a matter of the human soft infrastructures into which it is received. To close, I want to point to another example of the same two-sided relationship. Anthropic has said a lot recently about the so-called character of Claude, its flagship LLM. That's because they take the view I'm criticizing, that ethical AI is all about training AI to think ethically. But in Anthropic's predicted era of agentic AI, AI might, without human intervention, set up a large number of new companies, for example, each of whom would presumably have the same character because they're powered by the same AI. So they reason it's important to get it right. But for there to be just one character that might reproduce itself over and over would be for AI to mimic the weakness I began with, Aristotle's answer to his question, what makes for the virtuous person? The mistake is not in the answer itself, but in the fact that it comes in the singular, not the plural. Getting it right would be once again a feature of the AI ecosystem as a whole, the system that consists both of human beings and their AI companions, not what a model thinks, but the fact that there are lots of them. The right answer goes back to what I said about the diversity needed for a successful human society. And of course, setting AI aside for a moment, this is the situation that already obtains in the free world, a plurality of voices. In his recent encyclical about AI, the Pope said, arriving at the right ethical code for AI shouldn't just be left to the few. Well, I salute the democratic impulse here, but where the democratic impulse should really take us is away from the idea of the ethical code. The genius of democracy, and more generally of an open society, is that it's a way of containing difference. People who disagree fundamentally with each other can go on doing so, but without things disintegrating into civil war. The mere fact that there are plural voices, in Michael Oakeshott's phrase, the conversation of mankind, is itself an ethical good, but a good which is only realized by the ecosystem as a whole. In the case of an open society, it's relatively easy, at least to begin the list of soft infrastructures which make a plurality of voices possible: democracy, the rule of law, and free media, as I've already said. Once the soft infrastructures get more local and more informal, they're harder to specify. But not half as hard as it would be to specify what it would take on the AI side of things to create the positive symbiosis between the hard infrastructures of AI and soft human infrastructures that I've described. Given the financial power of the frontier labs and the comparative weakness of consumers and citizens in the AI marketplace, one of the most pressing questions for AI ethics, and beyond that, for global AI governance, is how an AI ecosystem would need to be configured so as to realize the good of pluralism. But if we can get pluralism for AI systems right, that will be one way in which we can learn not just from what Aristotle got right, but also from what he got wrong. Thank you. Now, if it's nice and crisp, I've got a minute and a second left, so we can have not exactly a Q&A session, but I'll take one question if there is one. Otherwise, I'll just go and sit down. And I'm completely blind because I've got a lot of bright lights in my eyes. I can see a question over there.
Thank you very much for this enlightening discussion and analysis. I have 3 points, but I shall speak only for one. I know that there is no time.
Yes.
For Aristotle, I want to speak. It's a whole discussion about why he uses singular instead of plural. This is a particularity of Greek language that we still have. And it's inclusive. Anyway, also virtue, the virtuous person includes diversity. And this is very important in ethics, in Nicomachean ethics, where he speaks about all the virtues and how you find virtue according to your temperament. Now, I come to the Socratic AI. I'm wondering if it is a little bit wishful thinking. Because in my view and my experience, AI has the tendency, inherent tendency, to transform everything to data. So if you try to find a convergence, a relationship, you cannot find a relationship. You find only data, so some kind of subject, agent, and object. So how can you find a relationship and meaningful equilibrium or meaningful relation between hardware and soft infrastructure? Thank you.
Right. Well, I wish I had longer to reply to that, but to try and keep it brief. I mean, look, let's have a discussion offline about the virtuous person. That's a different question, but although what you say is very interesting. I mean, in talking about the merits of Socratic AI, I didn't want to go so far as to say that human beings can have a meaningful relationship with an artificial agent in the way that they can with one another. So we don't need to think that AI is another person or that we can be friends with it or that it has all the virtues of a human teacher. Just think of it as a mechanical training tool, but a highly flexible one. It's still better, I think, in terms of training us to think for ourselves. If you caught, just as it will say, you know, how are you feeling today and stuff like that, or wait a minute, I'm thinking about such and such. If it says, well, before telling you what the answer to your question, what did Aristotle think about the virtues, why don't you give me your best first shot at saying what the answer is? And then it's more like a tutor, because it's getting you to say stuff and it's trained not to respond by answering your question for you, it's trained to challenge you. And I think it can be a useful training tool in that sense without pretending that it has the status of another human being. I mean, I should stop there, but happy to continue afterwards. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Harcourt.